imagine you sit alone in a room. No phone, no food, no music, no talking, just you and silence. Most people last about 11 minutes before they'd rather give themselves a mild electric shock than keep sitting there. That's not a joke. That's a real psychology study from the University of Virginia. We have become so addicted to stimulation that nothing feels physically unbearable. Now here's what I want to ask you today, not as a self-help guru, not as someone selling you a challenge, but as someone who finds the brain genuinely, almost embarrassingly fascinating what is actually happening inside your skull when you do that, when you cut off all the noise, because I've heard a lot of people say dopamine fasting, like it's some Silicon Valley wellness ritual. And I've heard a lot of other people say it's complete pseudoscience nonsense. And both groups, I think, are missing something beautiful. So let's actually figure it out together, from scratch. Okay, first, let's get something straight about dopamine, because almost everything you've heard about it is wrong. People say dopamine is the pleasure chemical, the reward molecule, the thing that makes you feel good. That's like saying fire is the warm thing, technically true, mostly useless. Here's what dopamine actually does. Imagine you're a little organism, doesn't matter what kind, and you're trying to survive. Your brain needs to answer one question constantly. Is this worth my energy? Should I walk toward that? Away from that? Try this again? Forget it. Dopamine is your brain's prediction and motivation signal. It fires not when you get a reward, but when you expect one that you didn't see coming. It's the chemical of anticipation, of wanting. There's a famous experiment. Scientists gave monkeys a light signal, then a juice reward. At first, the dopamine fired when the juice arrived, but over time, as the monkeys learned the pattern, the dopamine shifted. It started firing when the light came on. The signal of reward, not the reward itself. And here's the kicker. If the light came on and the juice didn't arrive, dopamine crashed below baseline, below normal. The monkey felt worse than if nothing had happened at all. That's the system you're working with. Not a pleasure machine, a prediction machine. And you've been handing that machine a fire hose. Now let's talk about what modern life does to this system. Your phone buzzes. Small dopamine hit, something might be interesting. You scroll another hit, another, another. Each one tiny, each one unpredictable. Unpredictability, by the way, is the most potent trigger for dopamine release. That's why slot machines work. Variable reward schedules. You never know when the good post is coming, so you keep pulling the lever. Now layer on top of that, food engineered to hit your brain harder than anything in nature. Pornography, video games with their perfectly calibrated XP curves. Notifications, breaking news, outrage. Every one of these is a dopamine trigger. Fast, easy, cheap. So what happens to the brain? This is where it gets really interesting and a little alarming. The brain, bless its heart, is trying to maintain balance, homeostasis. Scientists call it allostasis. The brain actively adjusting its baseline. When you flood a system with signal, the brain turns down the volume. It does this by reducing receptor density, literally pruning back the number of dopamine receptors, making itself less sensitive. This process is called downregulation. And here's what that feels like from the inside. Ordinary life becomes gray, flat, boring. Things that used to bring you joy, a walk outside, a conversation, cooking a meal, they just don't register the same way anymore. You haven't become a bad person. Your life hasn't gotten worse. Your brain has simply recalibrated to expect a higher baseline of stimulation. And anything below that baseline feels like nothing. This is not addiction in the clinical sense, not for most people. But it's the same mechanism at a lower intensity. The same dial, just turned up a few notches. All right, so some people in San Francisco, and then inevitably everywhere else, started calling this practice dopamine fasting. The idea, eliminate high stimulation activities, no social media, no junk food, no video games, no music, sometimes no talking, sometimes no eye contact. For a period of time, a few hours a day, a weekend. The internet went slightly insane over this. Half the articles said it was genius. The other half said it was pseudoscientific nonsense because, and they're right about this, you can't actually fast from dopamine. Dopamine is always being produced. Your brain needs it to move, to breathe, to exist. But here's where I think both sides got distracted by the name instead of the mechanism. The question isn't, can you stop dopamine? You can't. The question is, can you give your reward system time to recalibrate its sensitivity? And the answer, based on what we know about neuroplasticity and receptor regulation, is almost certainly yes. Think about it this way. Have you ever gone camping for a week? No phone signal, no Netflix, basic food? By day 2, you're a little cranky. By day 3, something shifts. By day 5, sitting by a river watching water move feels genuinely, deeply satisfying, not because you've become a philosopher, but because your brain has started upregulating. rebuilding sensitivity, turning the volume back up on quiet signals. That's the actual mechanism, not dopamine fasting, stimulation fasting. Letting the receiver recalibrate. Now, and I want to be honest with you here, the direct clinical research on dopamine fasting as a named practice is thin, almost non-existent, because it's a new term, loosely defined, and scientists don't love studying things with branding attached to them. But here's what we do have good evidence for. First, receptor upregulation is real. Studies on substance addiction consistently show that extended abstinence from a stimulus leads to receptor recovery. The timeline varies. For some stimuli, sensitivity begins returning within days. For others, it takes weeks, but the direction is clear. Second, boredom is a cognitive state, not an absence of thought. There's fascinating research showing that when the brain is understimulated, what we experience as boredom, it activates something called the default mode network. This is the network associated with mind-wandering, self-reflection, creativity, future planning. Basically, the boring brain is doing some of its most sophisticated work. A 2014 study in the journal Psychological Science found that people who did a boring task before a creative task performed significantly better on the creative task than those who did an engaging activity first. Boredom, it turns out, is a kind of cognitive incubation. Third, chronic overstimulation has measurable effects. Research on heavy smartphone users shows altered dopaminergic activity in the brain's reward center, the nucleus accumbens, lower GABA levels, patterns that look structurally like early-stage addiction profiles. Fourth, nature and quiet have measurable restorative effects. A 2008 University of Michigan study found that walking in nature compared to walking in a city significantly improved attention and working memory. Other studies show reduced cortisol, lower amygdala activation, improved prefrontal function after time in low stimulation environments. So the name dopamine fasting might be imprecise, but the underlying principle that your brain needs periods of low stimulation to maintain sensitivity and function well, that's not a trend. That's neuroscience. So what do you actually do with this? Let me be very un-Silicon Valley about this for a second. You don't need to sit in a white room staring at a wall. You don't need to fast from eye contact. You don't need to turn this into a competitive biohacking ritual that you post about later, which I note somewhat defeats the purpose. Here's what the science points toward in plain language. 1. Create genuine low stimulation windows, not I'll check my phone less actual windows. An hour in the morning before any screen. A walk without earbuds. Dinner without background noise. Start small. 11 minutes if that's all you've got. The brain notices even short breaks too. Let yourself be bored, really bored. Not I'll meditate, just bored. Stare out the window, sit with a cup of tea. Let your mind wander. The default mode network needs unscheduled time. Don't fill every gap. Some of your best thinking will happen in the gaps. 3, reintroduce low-key pleasures. This is the beautiful part. As your sensitivity recovers, you start noticing things again. The taste of real food, the satisfaction of a finished task, the warmth of an unhurried conversation. These aren't consolation prizes for giving up your phone. They're signals your brain has recalibrated. 4, be patient and honest. If you try this and the first day feels awful, that's data. It means your baseline is high, not a character flaw, just information. The crankiness is the recalibration beginning. The goal isn't to become a monk. The goal is to stay the owner of your own attention. Here's what I keep coming back to talk about the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing the thing itself. His father taught him that. They'd walk through the woods and his father would say, that bird there in Portuguese, it's called bamtivio. In Chinese, it has another name. In Russian, another. But knowing all those names doesn't tell you a single thing about the bird. Watch it. Notice what it does. That's knowing. I think we do this with our own minds all the time. We learn the names, dopamine, serotonin, neuroplasticity, and we feel like we understand. But the real knowledge is in the noticing, what does your brain actually feel like after a day of constant stimulation? What does it feel like after a morning of quiet? Can you feel the difference between wanting something and enjoying it, between seeking and arriving? That's not a wellness question. That's a scientific one. You are the experiment. Your attention is the measurement instrument. The reason I find dopamine fasting interesting, badly named as it is that it's really an invitation to become curious about your own mind, to run little experiments, to notice, and curiosity as it happens is one of the highest dopamine states there is. The anticipation of understanding something, of figuring it out. So in a weird way, doing all of this, thinking about all of this, asking these questions, that is the reward. You haven't been fasting from dopamine. You've been redirecting it. So here's where we've landed. Dopamine isn't a pleasure chemical. It's a prediction signal. And modern life has been calibrating that signal to expect constant, high-intensity input. Dopamine fasting, despite its imprecise name, points at something real. Your brain can recalibrate. Your sensitivity can recover. The quiet things can become satisfying again. You don't have to go on a silent retreat to test this. Just try one morning before anything else. No phone, no podcast, no news, just coffee or tea and a window. 20 minutes. Notice what happens. That's the experiment. If you want to go deeper on any piece of this, the neuroscience of boredom, the default mode network, the research on nature and attention, I've linked everything in the description. Real papers, real studies. Go read the bird. And if this made something click for you, or if you think I got something wrong, tell me in the comments. Genuinely, I read them. I learn from them. That's not a platitude. That's also dopamine working correctly. Subscribe if you want more of this. We go slow, we go deep. We try to actually understand things.